Election day just around the corner. So what's being done here in Ohio to make sure that it's a fair election and also that your voice gets heard? Who better to ask than Ohio's Secretary of State, Frank LaRose. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Yeah, election season's here. We're excited.
And it's a busy time. Everybody around here is working hard and making sure everything's going to be just right on November 5th. Let's talk about that, because when we talk about the election, we hear the word integrity a lot these days. And in Ohio, it seems like that we're leading the way as far as that process is concerned.
Our job is to make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat. It's convenient, and especially agriculture professionals have busy lives, and they appreciate that convenience of the different options, absentee voting, early voting, or election day voting. But as much as it's important that we make it easy to vote, we also need to make it hard to cheat. And we've achieved that balance in Ohio a couple different ways. First, the structure of elections administration. People don't realize this necessarily, but in other states, it's not a bipartisan process necessarily. In Ohio, it is. If you go to your county board of elections, there's 2 Ds and 2 Rs that work well together to run the elections. The staff is half D and half R. We also maintain accurate voter rolls. That's not something that we apologize for. We take deceased voters off the voter rolls on a monthly basis, and actually more frequently as it gets up to election day. We make sure that only citizens can be registered to vote. Of course, that's the law. It's my duty. Unfortunately, some say, oh, no, this is not a thing that you should focus on. Of course we should. And we've removed 600 non-citizens from the voter rolls this year that were able to get in. We caught them and then removed them from the voter rolls and referred them for prosecution in many cases as well to county prosecutors. We also check IDs. Nothing discriminatory about that. You have to prove your identity when you come in to vote. You have to prove your identity when you request an absentee ballot, for that matter, as well. And then after the election, we do what's called a post-election audit. We have both electronic tabulation that gives us that quick result on election night. We want to know on election night the unofficial results. But then we also have a paper ballot for every vote cast. Without exception, every ballot in Ohio is a hard copy paper ballot. And so that electronic result on election night gives you the quick result. 3 weeks later, those Democrat and Republican election officials working together count the hard copy paper and compare it side by side. So we've got actually those 2 processes running in parallel to make sure that it's an honest election. When we do that post-election audit, we've routinely had an accuracy rate above 99%. In fact, the whole time I've been in this office, we've either been 99.9 or 99.98% when we count the hard copy paper and compare it to that electronic result. So whatever method you choose, it is convenient, and Ohioans should know that it's also honest.
One thing Ohio has, many states doesn't, is an election integrity unit. What is that exactly?
So I did this funny thing when I took office and read the law and saw what the responsibilities were. We went through and sort of found all the different areas where it said the secretary shall or the secretary may. And one of the things that we saw in there, it said the secretary shall investigate fraud or irregularities in the elections. Well, I looked around the office, we didn't have investigators, right? So if my job, according to the law, is to investigate fraud and irregularities, we should have people with the expertise to do that well. It had been in the past done by clerks, staffers, really purposeful, smart people, but not somebody with a law enforcement background that knows how to really conduct a proper investigation, follow the rules of evidence, subpoena documents, put a witness under oath, all those things you need for a prosecutor to actually take that case into a courtroom and secure a prosecution when somebody does violate the law. So we stood up an investigative unit. We call it our public integrity unit. The election integrity team is part of that. And these are retired law enforcement officers, people that bring a whole career of law enforcement experience to the job. And this is a great thing to see. Other states are now following our example. And so you may have seen that recently we've pointed out that we're not seeing enough county prosecutors take up these election law cases. There's a variety of reasons for that. They're busy. They've got other priorities in some cases. In some cases, they need more evidence. Well, we now have a team in place that can develop that evidence and actually bring it to a county prosecutor so that when somebody does violate the law, they will face justice. The old saying is mess around and find out. In Ohio, if you mess around with election integrity, you will find out, and it's because of that election integrity team that we have doing these investigations.
There have been violations and have been prosecutions because of that here.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And again, election fraud is rare. We need to keep it rare, right? Like carjackings are rare in my neighborhood as well, but when one occurs, we want to make sure that law enforcement investigates it and that the bad guys face justice. And so just because something is rare doesn't mean that we ignore it. In fact, we keep it rare by aggressively enforcing it. And so we've seen in the time I've been in this office hundreds of cases of election crimes that we have found, or suspected cases of election crimes. We refer those to county prosecutors, and we've been, gently encouraging our county prosecutors, working with our AG as well, to make sure that those cases don't just sit on a shelf, that they actually get further investigated and then hopefully get prosecuted.
There are misnomers and rumors about elections, and people go to their certain election site and they might think they see something that might not be right. The ballot machines themselves, we have a numerous amount of different machines. They all do the same job. Can you talk about those a little bit? How they're, not just self-standing, but they're not hooked up to the internet, and some of the things you hear about those concerns.
You're right. There's a lot of false information out there, particularly on the internet. It was Abraham Lincoln that said you can't believe everything you see on the internet.
I saw that.
Yeah, of course not. But you can't believe everything that you see on the internet, and unfortunately, a lot of just utter BS is out there. And sometimes I think it distracts people from where the real concerns are. We really need to focus on maintaining accurate voter rolls, taking non-citizens off, prosecuting crimes, auditing elections, all of those kind of things. Some of these really sort of fantastic ideas that people have, you can pretty easily disprove. One of them is related to voting machines being hacked, right? And so people have this false notion that somehow you could remotely tamper with a voting machine. You can't. Now, can a voting machine be hacked? Anything can be hacked. Your tractor, your toaster on your counter, anything, if you manipulate it, if you put your hands on it, can be hacked. But voting machines in Ohio are not capable of being connected to the internet. We buy machines that don't have a Wi-Fi, a Bluetooth, a LAN connection. There's no way to connect a voting machine to the outside world. The only thing it connects to is the wall outlet that powers the thing, and then it gets tested before each election by a bipartisan team of technical experts. They call it the logic and accuracy test. In fact, you can go down to your Board of Elections and observe as they're doing that right now. They're testing each machine. There's a D and an R standing there with a clipboard with a checklist going through to make sure they function properly. Again, if somebody was allowed to get into the Board of Elections, take a screwdriver and crack open the machine, could they tamper with it? Yeah, but we'll never allow you to do that. And if you did do that, we would put you in jail, right? Like, it's a serious offense. The voting machines are secure and they're highly accurate, and that machine is how we get that quick result on election night. Again, we want to go to bed on election night knowing the results. If we had to hand count millions of ballots with dozens of issues on each ballot, right, because it's local candidates, statewide, federal candidates, issues and levies and all this kind of thing, if you had to hand count those ballots in Ohio, you wouldn't know the winner until Thanksgiving, right? And that wouldn't make anybody happy. So we get that rapid result electronically on election night, but again, that paper backup is how we make sure that the machines function. I've had people say this. They say, all right, LaRose, why don't we just have hand-counted paper ballots? Because by God, you can't cheat with paper. Well, that's not true either. If you know your history, if you look at Chicago in the 1960s, of course, people could find a way to cheat with paper. And so it's not that there's one silver bullet, but the important thing is to make sure that we've got redundancies and backups and checks. And the fact that we run electronic tabulation and then check it with paper shows that we have those two running in parallel, and the two have to match up. And again, that's why you can feel good about it. But here's the thing. If you want a crash course in how this really works, sign up to be a poll worker. Every county board of elections is looking for poll workers. We need about 35,000 of them. And listen, it's a long day. It's a day away from your busy life. And I know that it's hard for people to take a whole day off and do this. But sign up to be a poll worker. You'll get paid for it. That's not the best reason to do it. But you'll know why I can say with confidence, at the end of that day, when you come home and kick your shoes off and watch the results come in, you'll know why I say with confidence that Ohio makes it both easy to vote and hard to cheat.
I wasn't worried about the ballot, but now I'm concerned about my toaster. Can't be too light, can't be too dark, so I got to keep an eye on that. Before I let you go, I had a chance to tour your office, and you showed me some of the things, and people may not or may know that you have an agriculture background.
Yes, I do.
One of the pride possessions in your office is a Farm Super M.
It's a little die-cast model. It kind of reminds me of the job I'd rather be doing on some days. I started working on a farm in Copley Township where I grew up when I was, 13 years old, picking sweet corn and working around the farm, Mark Bender's farm in Copley. I still go back to help with hay. Usually get back for the first cut, sometimes for the second cut. That was pretty meager this year, and there was no third cut, just out of the question because of the weather that we've had. But no, I love that part of my past. It really taught me a lot. That was my job all through high school until I left for basic training, and again, still love going back there. It's not only a great part of Ohio's heritage, but it's a lifestyle. And it's also a great part of Ohio's future. As you know, agriculture is the biggest industry in Ohio. Ohio's first industry happens to still be Ohio's biggest industry, and producing the food, fuel, and fiber that the world needs is something that Ohio can pride pride ourselves on as an industry, as an economic standpoint, but it's also an important way of life. It's a family lifestyle that teaches people resilience, creativity, work ethic, certainly, and I was just blessed to be able to be raised that way.
I know we can't answer all the questions you might have about the election, but if someone had questions and want to learn more, how can they do so?
Well, the trusted source, again, in a world where there's a lot of dubious sources out there, is voteohio.gov. If you go to voteohio.gov, you can sign up to be a poll worker. You can print off the form to request your absentee ballot if you want to vote from your own kitchen table. You can find out where your polling location is going to be. You can see your sample ballot so you know what's going to be on it. Really all the information, including the security protocols that we have, all there at voteohio.gov. Also, your county board of elections is a good resource. And then we're also on social media. I'm just at Frank LaRose on all the different platforms, and we work to constantly put out a stream of accurate information, sometimes to fact check and myth bust things and everything else as well. So maybe give me a follow there on social media also.
Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, appreciate you being with us.
Hey, thank you. Take care.
Hi, I'm Mike Boyert from Boyert's Greenhouse and Farm. My wife and I live in Medina County. Right here at Boyert's, we have 43 employees, 14 of them are full-time employees. Keeping good quality help has been one of our biggest concerns in our industry today. Through the health benefits plan, which was one of the issues we were trying to find a solution for, to help provide health coverage for these families, these young families in our industry, so we can keep them. You can't ask for a better program than the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan when it comes to the health benefits for each and every individual. It makes me go to bed at night feeling that I have a greater advantage than the guy down the road because I'm providing these tools to these young folks, and I know they're going to stay.
Learn more about the Ohio Farm Bureau Health Benefits Plan at ofbhealthbenefitsplan.org.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Election day, just around the corner. Some big decisions to be made at the polls. The Farm Bureau-AGGPAC Election Guide has been created once again this year to serve as an introduction to the people hoping to earn our trust and our vote to be our leaders at the federal, state, and local levels. You'll find that right here in this Our Ohio magazine on page 43. To talk more about the election guide, Whitney Bowers, Director of State Policy and Grassroots Engagement with Ohio Farm Bureau. Whitney, welcome back to the podcast. Good to see you as always.
Hi, thank you for having me.
This isn't just about, the election as far as who is going to earn our vote or hoping to earn our vote. This election guide has quite a bit in it. What does it entail?
Yeah, so the election guide is full of information to hopefully help make your voting process smooth. It covers information about AGPAC, how we designate candidates, along with information about voting in Ohio, the important dates like early voting, which started October 8th, and how to request an absentee ballot. We also have a Q&A session from Senator Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno in regards to their Senate campaign. And 6 candidates for the 3 Ohio Supreme Court seats all shared information with us. Their full answers can be found on farmvotesmatter.org because they had so much good information to share with us. We needed to give them more space than we have, even though our election guide is very, very full. So their responses were shortened, and in the printed guide, you can read the shortened versions, and then you can read the longer versions online. And then finally, we have what we call our checkmark pages, which is a listing of all of our Friend of Agriculture designations for our state house and congressional candidates.
You know, these are questions that candidates don't answer in the mainstream media. Agriculture is not talked about a lot when it comes to the election. So getting their answers to these very Farm Bureau specific questions, very, very helpful for those in our industry and in our organization. You mentioned, Whitney, AGPAC. For those who don't know, what is AGPAC?
So AGPAC stands for Agriculture for Good Government Political Action Committee, and it's a federal nonpartisan political action committee affiliated with Ohio Farm Bureau. This means it's the legal entity that can engage in the political process of supporting candidates running for office at the state and national level. AGPAC also supports a number of general bipartisan grassroots activities, from engagement on ballot initiatives and some campaigns and work that we've done in that area, all the way to our election guide, which AGPAC helps produce.
You also mentioned Friends of Agriculture. Can you walk us through that process? It all starts at the county level, but how does that work to get a candidate's name with our check mark next to it here in the election guide?
Yeah, so that is a multi-part process for the state house and congressional candidates, and it depends on the status of the seat. Is it being held by an incumbent seeking re-election, or is there no incumbent running for the seat and it's what we call an open seat? So our process begins after the primary election, and we do not engage until the ballot for the general election has been set. So once those candidates for the general have been determined, our county Farm Bureau leaders start working through the process to screen open seats and review the incumbents. So to break it down even further, for our open seat candidates, both candidates are invited to meet with our local Farm Bureau leaders within that district, where they can discuss agricultural priorities and issues within the industry and within their communities, things that are specific to their communities. Those local screening committees can recommend neither candidate, one candidate, or both candidates be named a friend of agriculture. The process for an incumbent candidate seeking re-election in the same chamber is slightly different. That process still begins at the local level, where county Farm Bureau leaders are asked to review the incumbent representing them and what kind of engagement they've had with that legislator throughout the term. And then the incumbent candidates themselves are sent a survey and asked to provide feedback on agricultural issues currently being discussed in the industry and the state. And then we also take into consideration any voting records that have been reviewed and relate to our policies that have been identified as a key issue for our organization. So it's a long process, and it's very member driven, and there's a ton of feedback at every point.
Yeah, it's stringent. And like I said, it happens at the county level with the help, of course, of you folks on our policy team at Ohio Farm Bureau. And it is quite a process, but it does help our members begin to understand the decisions that are being made at the local level, state level, and federal level, and just how important putting people in these positions actually is. And November 5th, we're going to make some really big decisions, as I mentioned, and those decisions are personal. That's why there's a booth, right? That's why we have to go in there on our own and make our own decisions. So how do you recommend, if you're an Ohio Farm Bureau member and you get this election guide, utilizing it when it comes to November 5th and heading to the polls?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great conversation. The election guide is one of our most comprehensive member-led resources. And while we spend months compiling the information and asking our local members to meet with and review candidates, this guide is just one part of the puzzle for most voters. These recommendations are based on conversations about agricultural policy and issues. And for most voters, there are additional questions that they want asked and answered. And there are many things that they want to take into consideration when making those final choices. So while this is a great resource and a testament to the grassroots engagement of our members, this process is very unique to Ohio Farm Bureau. It's not something everyone does, and we're very, very proud to be an organization that engages in all 99 House seats and all the Senate seats that are, up. And it's a very important process. It's a very important process for us, but it's just a component of what voters might want to know in the months leading up to an election. A very important component, but how everyone weighs those pieces is a personal choice.
I mentioned how this election guide is in the Our Ohio Magazine September-October issue. There is also, as you mentioned, a digital version online. How can people listening or watching find that now?
Yeah, so you held it up and it looked great. I almost held it up as well. It's in our energy issue, which is talk about a double whammy of being chock full of information. So you can find out more about AGPAC with some additional information about how to prepare to vote and additional candidate information including those full Q&As I talked about, and Q&A policy guides from American Farm Bureau from the presidential candidates. Those can be found at farmvotesmatter.org. And if you would like to access a digital version of the election guide, you can find it at ofbf.org behind once you log in there as a member. So again, one of our greatest member resources, and it is out there for members to give them hopefully as much ag information and ag policy discussion as they need for the election.
Whitney Bowers, Director of State Policy and Grassroots Engagement with Ohio Farm Bureau. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.